Good afternoon, and welcome to Creating a Culture of Cybersecurity to Thwart Sophisticated Phishing Campaigns, a Health System CIO Media Inc. production sponsored by Proofpoint. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the editor-in-chief of Health System CIO, and I'll be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A box, and we will take those later in the program. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to go about 35 to 40 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring Chris Akeroyd, SVP and CIO at Children's Health, Dennis Leber, Interim CISO at UConn Health, and Ryan Witt, Managing Director for Healthcare with Proofpoint. And then we will have our Q&A. So let's jump right in. Chris, let's start with you. Can you give us an overview of your organization and your role?
Absolutely. Good afternoon or good morning. So Chris Akeroyd, Senior Vice President, Chief Information Officer for Children's Health in Dallas. So we are a two-hospital pediatric system in the Dallas Metroplex, about the 8th largest pediatric facility in the nation. So we are a tertiary quaternary facility focused on with over about 55 specialties and subspecialties around pediatrics. We are a teaching hospital and have an academic relationship with University of Texas, UTSW, UT Southwestern.
Very good, Chris. Thank you. Dennis?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Dennis Leber with UConn Health. Our hospital is about a 300-bed hospital, general hospital, with several clinics and services. So, you know, what you would think of a normal hospital and visiting, that's what you get with UConn Health. I do get to tout us a little bit. Last week, U.S. Newsweek named UConn Health Jack Dempsey Hospital the best hospital in the world.
Pretty good praise.
Yeah.
Ryan?
Hi, great to be here. Ryan Witt. In addition to be the Managing Director for Healthcare at Proofpoint, I am also what we call the resident CISO for healthcare at Proofpoint, and I run the company's healthcare customer advisory board. So very tunnel vision focused on healthcare. Proofpoint essentially defends data and protects people. We're a large cybersecurity organization, very much focused on trying to thwart the type of attacks we're going to talk about here today.
Excellent. Very good. All right, Dennis, we're going to start with you. What types of phishing attacks are you seeing? Are they more frequent? Are they more sophisticated than in the past? And then are they targeted to certain individuals or constituencies?
Yeah, you know, the biggest thing that I'm seeing, as far as the sophistication, I don't think it's changed much. And I contribute that to the psychological profile that these attackers use. You know, it's been proven in the research that the common things you see as misspellings and bad grammar is purposely done because the folks that tend to fall for those fall within the categories that don't notice that. Some of them are complex though. I mean, there's some really good ones I've seen throughout the years in the last few months. But the main thing with me is they all usually result in a credential harvesting result. So not so much for the click on the link and let's download something, which still happens. The majority of what I see is credential harvesting because our hackers have learned now it's much easier to log in than it is to hack in.
And how are they doing that, Dennis? What's the technique to get a hold of the credentials?
Usually, you know, it's the preempt of you've got to accept the payment, you've got to update your HR, you know, something alluring to the humans that they're contacting to get them to click on it and then enter something. You know, like your email's about to expire, you're going to lose your documents if you don't update. So something that convinces and completes the shell game shuffle of put your username and password in. And surprisingly, you know, folks do it. We don't see an overabundance, but it's purposeful. So it does trick people, and they put their username and password in. And it's a good item to promote a multi-factor authentication because we've had some folks put their username and password in, but then they get that prompt and they realize, oh, wait a minute, that's not me. But it's complex. and I say it's varied. I don't think there's one individual technique other than, you know, something that puts that sense of urgency, or you're going to lose something if you don't put your username and password in.
Right, right. So a sense of urgency, and ultimately the goal you're seeing is to get the username and password. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, seeing a lot of the same things. I would say sophistication, it probably covers the range. You have your traditional stuff that you've seen for years, and I am seeing some smarter, more intelligent attempts at this. We've seen some good impersonations of third-party vendors, whether they have compromised the third-party account or not. But I've seen some examples where they've come across as somebody we do business with, using a name of somebody we do business with the links of, you know, your past this invoice, or you know, something important, click here type of thing. And you know, so that I would say that we're seeing a lot more of that, and we do take the opportunity to take some of the really good ones, clean them up, and reuse them back in our phishing tests. And so as they continue to get better and more believable, we push that back out to our users to continue to test them against you know, everything, all of our training and awareness that we do.
That's very interesting to do that. Question: you mentioned that some have the appearance of coming from some of your third parties, and some are very good. Are there certain cases where you will send those to the third parties and say, "Hey, just a heads up, look at this. It looks really like it's coming from you." I don't know if there's anything they can do, but do you at least want to make them aware?
We do. We do make them aware, and for us, it opens an investigation when there is that close of a tie to a business relationship. Because from us, we need to know: are you compromised, or is
Right.
somebody just impersonating? And that, you know, for us, it kind of goes back into how we have our system set up of the DMARC and, you know, the policy frameworks around how we receive email, and, you know, how did that come in without, you know, throwing off alarms, of validation of the vendor or the mail servers.
Do you ever have to? Is it ever so good that you have to send it to them and say, "Is this you? Is this legit?" Like, we can't even tell. It seems suspicious, but you have to tell us if this is someone who works for you or if this is you.
Yes, we've done that a few times, and in one case, it actually ended up being that the third party's email accounts were compromised.
So
So I know,
you ultimately were the one that let them know through sending them that. Wow,
yeah,
very
it
interesting.
actually it is actually a great win of a story is the user caught it. So it wasn't necessarily caught by our systems. The user didn't seem right, didn't feel right. So that's really a lot of our education is, you know, raise your hand, and they did. And sure enough, a little bit of investigation and conversation with our accounting and finance department, we all came to the determination it wasn't right. And so it was a phone call over, and obviously you don't want to email back the compromised account, but yeah, it was a phone call over to get to the bottom of it, and it was an issue.
Very good, Ryan. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, building on what's been said, I mean, I would say absolutely credentials is the nirvana state. Everyone's looking for credentials. Once you get access into the network, you can do lots of nefarious activities, right? So access is king, and they get access through getting the credentials. We see sophistication really focused more around targeting those organizations, or sorry, those individuals within an organization who have a higher propensity to click, not necessarily because they're doing anything wrong, but more by the nature of their job. So I think you talk about supply chain here. That's a good example. Those who are dealing with your business associates or your suppliers have to download documents. They have to download files. They have to, you know, verify purchase orders and invoices. They have to click on links. And so just by the nature of their work, they act in a vulnerable way. They are more vulnerable. I think where the sophistication comes into play here is the bad actors have tried more and more to learn what those people and those job functions do, what would be would be an appropriate request to send to them. how to use language that would be aligned to those job functions, requests that are aligned to those job functions. And I think then you see more and more, kind of as Chris kind of alluded to, it's harder and harder to ascertain or determine is this a legitimate email request or something that is suspicious. And so, yes, going back to your third party, your supplier, your business associate is a great sort of remedy. But yeah, so I think sophistication, we see a lot in this sort of area here today.
All right, very good. Next question, Chris, we're going to start with you. How should CIOs and CISOs fight against phishing attack? And there's kind of two general buckets, I think, technologies and tools, and then user education. So your thoughts around that?
For us, this is a team sport. We look at the risk in our organization, and it's not an IS-owned or a cybersecurity-owned risk by itself. And the biggest threat issue is our user. So that's where it all begins, right? Is our user awareness and training. We do a substantial amount of it and try to keep it fresh for people as we push out documents, communications, training materials on a very, very regular basis. We've got a program that goes through, I think probably like most people, with programmatic phishing tests. And we do continue to increase the complexity of them. And we do a lot of education, right? In some cases, we do so much awareness training, and it's not a problem. It's just we've created a culture in the organization that people are afraid to click on things, even when they're legitimate. So not a bad thing. And what we see are the numbers have been very good. It's not zero, which is the problem, right? It's this is one of those situations where our security has to be perfect all the time, and the attacker needs just one time to not be perfect. And our phishing rates, though, with the awareness program, we've hit a good stride. We're down below 2.5% click rate. Again, not zero, but I like the numbers in the 2% range. I want to keep driving it down. We even took it further. I think we had the conversation a second ago on multi-factor authentication of, sure, your identities are stolen, but MFA backs it up. We now do MFA tests, kind of like a phishing test against multi-factor of, will you click the button to allow the person in? And so that's just one step further of, I got your credential, now I'm going to go ahead and try to log on as you, will you accept me in? So those have been good awareness programs for us as well.
Very good, Dennis.
Yeah, there's not a lot to add to that. I mean, that's what we're doing in the industry. I can speak to some of the things I've done in the past for success. The educational part is probably the paramount part. We have to build a program around the human. That's the target, right? And these are human users that at the end result. A technique that I've used in the past, we created a website and called it the Fishbowl. So really good phishing attacks that were successful, we published them on an intranet site where folks could go check. So you don't necessarily always have to call the service desk or security. You can go to the Fishbowl page and go, oh yeah, here it is. Here's the email I just got. It's right here. And even on the opposite of that, because to Chris's point, you do create a culture of that fear of clicking. So we put in, hey, we got a lot of reports that this email was, sorry, somebody rang my doorbell.
It's okay.
So,
no worries.
Everybody knows that. Yeah. We put a good email in. So a lot of reports came in, our inquiries came in about this email, which was actually a good email. We would add that there too. So folks could go, oh, this was a good email. So then it also provides that example and reference point. The other key element for me is I call it SPAR training. So we always call it security awareness training. I like to call it SPAR training, security preparedness. And most of us cover that part. So we do that awareness, or the preparedness comes in. Here's what they look like. Here's what you should be looking for. And then I like to add that R part is the response training. What do I want you to do? So Chris had a great example. We've all had that where a vendor got hacked and you get this phishing email, but it's from one of your legitimate vendors. Well, that's where we add that education and talk to our users about Here's what you do if you're suspicious. Call the person. Call them from an outside source. Don't email them back, obviously, to compromise, but how do you respond to these things? And I think that helps a lot. And then, of course, Proofpoint's on here, and we're a Proofpoint customer. We rely on our Proofpoint data. The data that comes out of those dashboards is tremendous. Who's your targeted folks, and we try to target some training. It's a little more difficult to do in organizations, takes time, but hey, we've noticed from the last 3 phishing campaigns, you failed them all. What's going on, right? How do we help you get better, right? Because it is situational. They cannot give a crap, or they really need some help in identifying our workflows. And then my advocate always is stop using email. Well, ideally we can never get rid of it, but stop using it. If you're a Microsoft Teams office, use Teams, right? Chat as much as you can in these more innovative, collaborative ways we have. So don't rely so heavily on email. So then you start getting away from some of that. And then the last part is what's the standardization, especially like for the insider threats in the compromised accounts internally. Do you have standard signature lines? Do you have language that's not allowed or must be included in all your email correspondence? So what are some of your policies that dictate the formatting and the sending and receiving and the normalcy of your emails that would be another red flag that you could add to this may be a nefarious attack?
So that's sort of language that you would expect to be in any emails you receive. And if it's not there, it's an indication that this is not from who it's supposed to be from.
That or the other way, it's a great example, and I forget who the organization is. During their inclusivity program, they realized that they were using language in email, and they had certain terms. And I'm making it up here, so don't quote it, but like at the end of your email salutation, you couldn't use the word thank you. But you start getting emails where the sender is using the word thank you, and that across the organization, that word is not allowed, which could be an indicator that, hey, it's not a good email. Yeah.
Interesting. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
I mean, building a little bit on what Dennis said, I would say that not every email address or not every employee is created equally in the bad actor's eyes. And so there are definitely people within your organization that are highly more desirable to target. And so the tools I would use is trying to figure out where the attackers are attacking, so you know where to play defense. And there is threat insight around this, and there are some attributes about how people work. We talked about a little bit earlier. If they work in a vulnerable way, then they're more likely to be attacked. If they proceed to have access to credentials, so they're a system administrator, or they're in your IT or InfoSec team, they're probably more likely to be attacked. If you're classic VIP and they got a high-profile persona in the public marketplace, then they're going to be attacked. If you're working with a high-value IP, I don't know, maybe you have a research component to your organization, they're going to be attacked. So threat insight can tell you that, and I would be layering in your defenses accordingly about where the attackers are most active. I mean, there's a lot of sporting analogies here, right? But if you're, I guess we're in March Madness, so let's use a basketball analogy. If you got a team who's really heavily reliant on the three-point shot, well, you're going to probably guard the perimeter a little bit more, right? So I think that sort of application applies here as well.
I'll second that. I think that's a great point, Ryan, and something we're trying to get better at. We have that very attacked person list, and so it's what does that tell you? And that's exactly what it is we're having conversations of how do we adjust our awareness program to those individuals and make them aware that they are targeted, and here's some additional training, and here's some partnership that we need to have with you. And so yeah, would love more input on that from how we should round that out.
Great, thank you.
Chris, you mentioned about getting those that some people are almost afraid to click on links. Are we worried about overdoing it and impeding business in that sense, or do we say, hey, that's not something I'm going to worry about. I'm just going to get those numbers down as far as we can get them down. I'm not going to worry about that. What's the best way to think about it?
It's a great question. email is a tool that it's not going away. We don't want to cripple business at all. There's a couple things we do to approach this. We have banners just probably like everybody else on inbound email saying warning inbound external email. Typically what happens is your marketing, your HR department says, hey, we're going to be sending a survey from this third party. Because a lot of our education is don't click on, be very careful about clicking on things and links with an orange banner. So HR is like, I want to bypass that. Well, we've been pretty inflexible in that, but we have adjusted to the point that if it's a trusted vendor or an expected survey, we do change the banner saying this is an expected survey, and the banner color is different, but it does say it's links in this are okay to click. And so we've done some of that. Additionally, knowing that, I mentioned a second ago our phishing rates, the failure rates. People are still clicking. It's not zero. So we've moved to isolation on links that are opened. Everything has a URL rewrite, and everything goes into an isolation. So when they click on a link, it launches on a third-party servers that are off of ours, and that way it gets scanned. And if something is there or malicious or it redirects the URL, it should be caught. And so that when we rolled that out, not the most popular thing, but through some education of here's why, we were able to get there and able to keep it. So we try to hold that line real close on what does get put on the allowed list, which bypasses URL isolation, but very few things do, and no people in the organization. Everybody's created equal in our organization. CEO down. Our CEO didn't want to do it, but he's one of the very attacked people, right? So we're definitely not taking controls or defenses off of very attacked people or situations like that. So it's a balance. I'd say that through the awareness, people understand the risk, and we're trying to mitigate risk. And I know it's a little bit inconvenient to have to click an exit button once URL isolation opens, but it protects us.
Dennis, go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was Verizon and their DBR report, which comes out every year. It just came out in the fall. I think that report said, and kind of like their opening sort of preamble, they said, I went back 10 years ago, looked at the report, and essentially I could cut and paste the report from 10 years ago today. The point being is all the things that we were worried about in 2012 we're worried about now: phishing, credential harvesting. So I don't know about overdoing it, because I think there's still a lot of activity in that particular area. And in fact, it's my hypothesis, and maybe not a unique hypothesis, that we haven't really seen the rise in attacks on Internet of Things or Internet of Medical Things, because there's so much fruitful activity, unfortunately, around just doing these old school style attacks. And it's a lot easier to phish somebody than it is to try to penetrate a medical device. And so I think until we really lock down this sort of threat vector, we're not going to see activity elsewhere. And so therefore, I don't know if it's possible at this stage to overdo it.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Next question. Dennis, let's go with you. If certain roles are targeted more than others, a blanket approach to protecting all users doesn't make sense. Talk about targeting tools, education, and resources to the most at-risk roles. How can this be done most effectively?
Yeah, I think there's foundational items in place, and folks are starting to talk about this, but it's just like access. It's got to be role-based. The education that you would give to, say, your team that takes care of the grounds, who may not check their email ever, as opposed to, Chris and Ryan's example of the CEO, who, if you're, we'll refer back to Proofpoint, there's a very targeted person's dashboard, right? What are we seeing for them? So I think the big thing with too is we have to remember a missing element of cybersecurity across all practices of protection is the human factors elements in engineering. So what are we doing to remove those mistakes, that we call them, that facilitate success in hackers. And where are we adding in those stop gaps and controls, or, oversimplified, the seatbelts, like in our cars, that, hey, yeah, you might start going down the wrong path, but we got you, right? Seatbelt locked up, you're safe again. I think those are the big parts in the missing. It's a combination of the technical and administrative controls, and like that role-based training being one of the administrative controls. But how can we automate that through the technology? It's like, where's the seatbelts? And I think that's a big missing part that the industry, we still need to figure out. I think we're in the right direction. I think a lot of the data is there to facilitate how do you do that and make the decisions. I always advocate the big missing part is the human factors engineering. Where are we doing that? A lot of people in healthcare use the Swiss cheese model, right? All the holes lined up, we had a problem. Where do we offset the holes? So at some point it's stopped and remediated.
Chris, I'd like your thoughts.
I think Dennis did a great job around it, and I agree. We talked about this a little bit already, but it's if we know somebody's being targeted, we feel it's our responsibility to make them, one, aware of it, and then two, what action do we need them to do differently or be aware of. So, and for us on the IS and cybersecurity side, is we should increase our diligence on watching what's going that way, and being a little bit more proactive if we see something that's not quite right. So that's largely the direction we're moving on how we use those very attack lists. And but I think it does start again. For me, a lot of it's based in user awareness and training.
So, Chris, it's kind of interesting. You mentioned the isolation. When somebody clicks on a link, it can go into isolation, and then not everybody loves that. Might take an extra second and an extra click. You combine that with the fact that we're talking about protecting very attacked people. Sometimes those very attacked people are very high-level people. Sometimes very high-level people don't like having to do extra clicks and be inconvenienced. It creates an interesting dynamic for the CISO, who may be speaking to their boss and saying, no, I need you to keep doing this thing that you don't really love. So tell me about how you handle that as a CISO.
Well, you're right. I mean, those are the tough conversations, but those are the same people that are pushing for to have zero risk and to remain completely safe. And so it's a conversation, and it's rooted for us in a lot of we include our C-levels in cyber tabletops, walking through the anatomy of a successful attack, and we've talked about it here. It starts with usually a stolen credential, and comes in this way and grows. And when they start to realize business implications of how something so small of clicking on a link results in a complete ransomware downtime, it opens the conversation up differently now of how do we manage this risk, and this is why this is important. And even at the board level where we report this stuff out, the board's very interested in it. And fortunately, with all the media around the continued issues throughout every industry, and most specifically healthcare, awareness is also being generated outside of even our own conversation. So it's a lot easier to have these conversations now than it used to be. And I've even had board members external to the organization push and really question, should we allow employees to put titles and such on LinkedIn? That now that could potentially make them a target. And so it was an interesting conversation. We have not gone that far, but some other organizations do, where they don't allow you to really have much of an identity, or say, I'm the CIO or the CISO, or I'm a system admin, just because that could lend threat that way. It was an interesting conversation, but in all, to answer your question, it's just direct business impact conversation we have with the CEO or others as they're frustrated of it's this, or we have a ransomware attack. What's your choice?
Yeah, Ryan, you and I have spoken a number of times, and you're a big proponent of couching these conversations in a patient safety language when you're trying to convince people about needing to accept certain cybersecurity techniques and tools that may take them an extra second, that you couch it in patient safety, and that's how you're going to be most effective. Is that true?
It's an anecdotal observation. I've been doing this role for a long time. I engage a lot with healthcare CISOs and CIOs, and Proofpoint is very widely adopted within the industry. It feels like to me those CISOs or IT executives who can communicate the risk in terms of a link to the health system's mission, which are often oriented around patient safety, patient care, seem to be the most impactful in getting the attention of the hospital board in terms of being able to make the necessary changes, whether it's investments in technology or improving processes or changing workflows, whatever the remedy is. It feels like those who are able to communicate that in terms of back to the mission are the most successful at affecting real change. It's an anecdotal observation, to be sure, but definitely feels like that's the language that the board resonates more with and understands more. And it's not like compliancy is not an issue, not a driver. It's not like reputational harm is not a driver, and it's not like financial loss is not a driver, because those are all important too. But when you link it back to the mission, then I think you get people's attention.
Dennis, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I can't say anything more than Ryan did. I advocate that. If you've ever heard me talk anywhere else, especially in the general cybersecurity, I advocate that we can talk about risk and vulnerability, but you have to tie it back to the organizational goals, missions, and stated outcomes. You start there. So I could only mirror and reflect what Ryan was saying. Instead of going, hey, phishing attack calls ransomware, hey, phishing attacks can lead to this, which would impact the babies in the NICU, right? Or the overhead. So yeah, I completely support Ryan's analogy of that.
Yeah, you have to finish the connections, right? Phishing attack, ransomware, systems down, patient safety problems. You can't stop at ransomware because people say, well, I'm not paying the ransom, so what am I worried about? Maybe I get a few days off. So no, you have to finish that point. All right, this is an interesting question. I think it's going to involve HR, might even involve marketing, but what are the key roles that CIOs and CISOs should be working with on these internal education and anti-phishing campaigns? Dennis, let me start with you.
Yeah, I believe it takes a nation to raise a healthcare cybersecurity program. So we do rely on our regulatory compliance and control. So you're going to talk about your compliance officer, your privacy officer. So you should be holding hands and skipping down the road together on these. Utilizing your HR and your marketing. So are you tying this into annual evaluations? How does your HR support this? How do you measure that? Your marketing. People listen to marketing more than the cybersecurity. So how is your marketing office actually helping you get this message out, as opposed to the annual cybersecurity awareness or SPAR training, like I like to call it, or even the compliance training? How do you market this? If you have a psychology department, how are people learning? So how do we use, going back to that human factors engineering, how do we reach folks and make this stick? What are some innovative, creative ways that we're doing this? And then, the other part that comes to mind is, a lot of folks like to gamify. What mechanisms is your organization used to? How do you implement this into how they're normally working? So it ain't new. It's like, here's our regular channel of communication. So we may want to send emails, but everyone uses Slack. So how do we ingest ourselves into the normal flow that people are used to communicating and working, as opposed to adding something to them? And I think you have a lot of success when you can start looking at that, and then using just behavioral data analytics to some business intelligence to make decisions around those things.
Very good, Chris.
Yeah, Dennis kind of covered all the key roles. I think for us, it's very much the same. We are in lockstep with privacy and compliance, but there's obviously a very close tie to privacy as it comes to security. The marketing is important for us. They help us package things in a way that our users are used to consuming it. look, feel, same channels. There's multiple channels that our awareness training gets sent through. HR is an interesting one. It always, the conversation always bounces back of when somebody, you're doing a phishing test, for example, and somebody doesn't pass the test. What do you do? And how many times are they allowed to fail a test before some type of HR action is taken? And I think as an organization over the years, we've kind of gone all over the place with that one. So HR would be a kind of an interesting conversation to have. And we have a learning institute here as well that if you fail a test, you're immediately signed up as part of your learning record and transcript for additional education. When it does get to certain levels of failure, we do start notifying leaders, and we don't have right now, as far as teeth might be on too much, there's not a termination policy in place. Over years, people have advocated for it, but haven't gotten it. And I don't know if we should go that far or not, but it does start to, the leadership has to start getting involved. So that's really where the HR piece comes in for us, is help us train, help us reinforce, because this is critical.
Ryan, what anything in terms of what you've seen at successful health systems, in terms of who the CIOs and CISOs are interacting with?
Yeah, I was going to answer the question a little bit of a different way,
Sure.
actually. I think, I mean, I would totally agree with everything that's just been said, but I think for those on the phone, think about how your organization presents itself to the marketplace, right? What is your public persona? What do you focus on? And I say that because we were working with an academic healthcare organization who was known or had a significant amount of focus on research. And they actually had 6 different research units. And they were all very overt about this. Like, they were very proud about what they were doing, but rightfully so. But of those 6, there was one unit that they were particularly known for. They actually had kind of worldwide sort of notoriety for this one particular unit. Well, no surprise, the threat actors figured that out as well. So all those 6 research units getting the lion's share, I think 2/3 of all target attacks were going to that part of their organization. It's a very large organization. And then actually 2/3 of those 2/3, if I'm saying that correctly, were going to this one research unit that had the most sort of notoriety. So, that's how they presented to the marketplace. That's what the threat actors picked up on, and that's what they were attacking. So if you have that sort of, if that's reflective of how maybe your organization presents itself to the web, or to the World Wide Web and to the outside world, then maybe those are the roles that the people who work in those particular roles are the ones that should be working with a little bit more on these anti-phishing campaigns.
All right, very good. Well, Chris has teed up my poll question, Chris, even inadvertently. So we're going to launch this poll, title it "Enough is Enough." And here's the question: agree or disagree? We're just going to have a little fun here. Employees who fail 3 phishing tests after having received education upon hiring in the first 2, and maybe there's been some discipline and whatnot, should be terminated. Okay? Agree or disagree? I'd like to see what people think. Our panelists can vote too. So please vote, and we will get back to that in a minute. All right. Let's see. Let's go to one of our audience questions. Lately, we have seen it in terms of phishing. Fake HR email stating there was a problem with the paycheck. Click on this link to verify your information. And then they ghost the client's website with the login screen. And they gather the employee's username and password. Have you seen this, Dennis? Have you seen this particular attempt?
Yes.
Okay, Chris, have you seen it?
I have, yes.
Ryan, I'm sure you've seen it. If they've seen it.
Absolutely.
All right, so that's a popular one. Next question: how do you see artificial intelligence in the hands of the attacker affecting safeguards in the future? Ryan, I'm going to start with you.
I think it's an area of significant concern. I've personally played around with a lot of those tools, and your first experience with them is kind of jaw-dropping. The more you use them, the less impressive they look, because They only can go so far at this stage. It's kind of like reminds me of, the first stages of the internet. The first time you used Netscape or AOL or Mosaic, or whatever they were called back then, they were kind of really, really cool, and you realized they were quite limited. But I suspect we'll have the similar but rapid trajectory of them becoming much more powerful very, very quickly. So I don't think it's that long from now when those tools will significantly be problematic for those on the call who are trying to protect health systems. And back to Chris's point, you got to be right every single time. And I think these tools are going to make it harder and harder for it to be right every single time. And I think back to the poll question, it's like these attacks could get very sophisticated really, really quickly. And so it'd be pretty easy to fall foul and fail these sort of attacks if these things ramp up in the way that is quite likely.
Dennis, thoughts on AI?
Yeah, I think it's just like quantum computing. It's coming, to Ryan's point. What are we doing now to get ready for it? On the other side of that, though, I think we also got to learn how do we use it to protect. So not just worry about how they're going to attack us with it. Well, how is we as the defenders going to utilize it as well? So I think it's a two-front attack on getting ready for it.
Chris?
This is a scary one. What I've seen over the years is attackers are starting to become more organized and collectively working together. So you're starting to see a lot of things as services now, malware as a service, phishing as a service, and so on. And so we start looking at the collective attack from groups, and now you start introducing this AI through machine learning and other things. An article I read the other day lists out a bunch of things that this is going to bring. So it's not going to be just written, where it could craft maybe a better email, but they're predicting various image generation, audio generation, and video generation. So we're seeing that capability of deep fakes or being able to create images and do things like that. So it's very interesting where it's going. And obviously these are all technologies we're looking at internally to promote for our business use. And why wouldn't they collectively come at us with the same things that we're trying to improve our business with? So it's become quite an industry of interconnected kind of marketplaces in in that industry.
All right, I'm going to read. It's really a statement from one of our attendees, and then reveal the poll results. This is all quite interesting. So the sort of question/statement is: what does your organization do with people who are unable to prove competency in either clinical or administrative functions? And why wouldn't the same standard apply if someone's unable to prove competency with HIT devices and programs which are required for them to do their work, clinical or administrative? So saying, if you can't get the cybersecurity right, I think, why are you held to a different standard than somebody who can't do their jobs right? Which takes us to sharing the poll results, which completely surprised me. Asking this question, I would have thought, especially with this audience, the majority would agree. But that is not the case. 2/3 think the person should, and this is, Chris is going to shake his head. He's got a headache now reading these results. And Dennis and Ryan, they say, I can't believe it. They disagree. What are we going to do? Ryan, what are we going to do with results like these? What does this mean?
Honestly, I click disagree as well.
Oh my, you're softies. That's what you are.
I don't know. I think when I see the level of attacks that are coming, I think it's hard. I think it's really, really hard to discern between fake and not.
3 times, but 3 times.
3 times, yeah, that's becomes questionable. I guess maybe I am getting sympathetic in my older age. I don't know.
I love it. I love it. Chris, well, no, let's go to Dennis. He got his hand up. Dennis, what does this mean to you?
I disagree too.
Oh my God. So I'm a mean person. I'm just a mean person, I guess.
And I'll tell you why, and it's why I wanted to jump in, because phishing attacks, you never get the same one. So it's like a shell game. It's like 3-card Monte, right? You are being tricked. What we're forgetting in a lot of these situations are these people are victims, not incompetent. So we can give all the education in the world, but we can't cover every scenario of what these phishing attacks look like. So I think there's a lot to it. It's a case-by-case basis. If you've got someone and they're like, I just fell victim, it tricked me, here's what it is. As opposed to if you have a conversation with them, they go, I don't care, I think this place is stupid, right? So it's different to why we would fire them. You know, you have to ask yourself internally, do we have the administrative and technical controls in place that help prevent this? So I don't think it's just an instant firing. And I mentioned earlier about HR, and that's the other part I wanted to get in. So Chris talked a lot about how you involve HR and fire them. I take it more of, are we putting it into measurable? Is passing and being a part and contributing to cybersecurity a part of your job description? Most job descriptions don't have that in there. So it's the culture of cybersecurity that we're still fighting, that cybersecurity for the longest time just now starting to be recognized as a job function, a business area like the CFO, the CIO, the COO. It was always a bolt-on or a subsection of technology or the CIO. And it's starting to realize it's a key business function. It's not one of the most key business functions because it'll shut down the business if it's not proper. So are we including cybersecurity into your job descriptions? Through your annual reviews, do you have measurable metrics? So as a manager, do you have a metric maybe that says, do you talk about cybersecurity risk and phishing with your employees, right? As a director, do you do this with your managers? As an employee, are you passing your training? So until we get all that in place, I don't think we should be hiring, you know, the knee-jerk reaction shouldn't be firing until we get the other parts in place. We have to look internally a little bit and self-assess. Then we can get to that place where now we've done everything possible and you just don't care or you are incompetent.
Chris, I got to get your thoughts.
Well, I also disagreed.
Unbelievable.
I know you wouldn't like that, but you know, if Ryan and Dennis, they nailed it. You know, Ryan says the attacks are more sophisticated and they're really good, and Dennis really made a really good point of, you know, are they capable of doing their job? And so the comment that was written was, you know, around if they can't figure this out, why do we keep them, really? And it's, in my mind, you know, a physician may misdiagnose something and make a mistake, and we don't terminate them 3 times for misdiagnosis. I get the stakes are a little bit higher and the risk is higher, but if you've got the technical controls in place from a cyber standpoint, we should be able to mitigate one person giving away credentials and being able to isolate that, hopefully, if not be able to identify it. So people do make mistakes. I think it does become a problem, and I guess this is probably the answer HR would absolutely hate is maybe I'm more of a maybe is, you know, what is the competence level of that employee? Was it just so egregious that, okay, this is a problem? Or was it a realistic mistake? And I know there's a lot of gray area in that of making that determination, but I think it should factor into the overall competency of the employee. Are they technically competent in their role in the job description as written, or are they just blindly clicking everything to be malicious? I guess maybe I needed a third option. Give me a maybe.
Maybe. Well, listen, I think was a great dialogue right there and changed my thinking on the approach. So obviously, a lot for CISOs and CIOs to think about out there when they're working with HR and dealing with this much more gray area. Next audience question: how can you enforce clicking a phishing link if you encrypt the URL and the end user can't see the site that they are attempting to go to? Dennis, thoughts on that?
I don't really have a good answer for that because if it's that situation, it's going to be hard. But I guess I've never done that, nor I think would do that. So I don't know if I can give a really good answer to that one.
Okay, so you wouldn't be encrypting the URL as they stated in the question. Chris, what are your thoughts on that question?
It's a good question. We rewrite the URL and then it gets further rewritten into our isolation. So yeah, if you hover over the link, it's pretty cryptic. So part of our education now is if something just doesn't feel right, we have a button in the email that you click to report phishing. The team is very quick at responding to it. And they can write back, say, this is valid. And I use it sometimes. There's sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what this is. I wasn't in the email. Are they tricking me? Am I going to get set up and the CIO is going to fail a phish test? So I click the button and and wait for the team to respond, which could take, sometimes 30 minutes, but they'll come back and say, this is legitimate or this was not. And if it wasn't, we've got the capability to scan all mailboxes and pull back if it was, a blast type of email and retrieve those out of mailboxes. So, but to answer the question, it's tough, and it's just education of ask for help.
Ryan?
I think Chris nailed it. We rewrite the URLs, and ideally, as Chris said, put them in isolation, so you do kind of have maximum protection, and you kind of get around that problem then.
All right, Ryan, do you have a question for one or both of your co-panelists?
I guess the question that I'm curious about is, where do you think the role of the CISO goes from here? And I wanted to ask because we have a CISO and we have a CIO on the phone or on the call here, and there is a lot of talk about the CISO role maybe becoming a direct board position, maybe moving out of the IT organization. So how do you guys see that role and that evolving in the future?
Chris, you want to go first?
I have seen exactly what you're talking about, Ryan. I'm starting to see some positions that we report directly to a president or to our board. I think the risk is realized by leadership and by the boards as well. So I wouldn't say no to that. I mean, I could understand it, but it is, for us, it's very, very technical in how we approach and how we mitigate. And our security team is not large. I mean, I think we're just shy of 20 people, and that includes identity access management. So it's a team effort of everybody in infrastructure aligned and making sure that we're getting patches and vulnerabilities taken care of. And so having that, for me, I think this answers the question, the CISO evolution, they are becoming a more and more critical strategic partner in how we pull the entire IS organization and leadership of the organization outside of IS together to a common understanding of risk.
Dennis?
I hope we have some time left. So I've long advocated throughout my career that the CISO is stifled being a part of the IT organization or under the CIO. What other C-suite executive reports to another C-suite besides the CEO, right? Usually your C-suite people report to a CIO or a board. So that's a change that needs to happen. But I'll say it's a depends. I'm going to go Chris with the voting. It's a maybe or depends answer, because it's the competency of the CISO. To truly be a CISO, you should be that strategic leader that can direct the security program while communicating that risk, bringing light, and making sure that the voice and the message isn't filtered going to the folks who need to hear it. But we have to make sure that we do not lose the collaboration, the teamwork, and partnership that you have with a CIO and the COO and the CFO. So even separating the CISO out where I believe it should be, you have to make sure the collaboration remains strong, the partnership remains strong. With that being said, though, and Ryan and Chris, I can't remember which one you said, it goes, your security teams are small. The same investment in the security program has to happen. You look at security teams, it's like, I got 250 application developers, I got 300 people working the Epic, I got 500 people on the IT team, and you got 5 security folks. Well, just labor alone, anyone who does productions or Kaizen or anything, those numbers don't match. If that's really that important to you and you've got 1 or 2 people and a very small budget, then it's not important to you. You're just saying those words. So you also have to have the understanding that the cybersecurity program and team has to truly be invested and built like a complete business function area, like all the other business function areas. And where the maybe comes in, you're still going to need those deputy CISOs or business information security officers or whatever label you want to give them that are the operational, right? That a lot of times now CISOs have to wear a hat where I'm the strategic leader over here today. Then I have to go be an operations manager for a part of the day. And I might even have to work as an analyst for a little bit. And you're going to have to build out that foundation and the architecture of the program to make it work, without compromising the other things I just talked about.
Regarding continuing education, you can use the final slide in this deck. You'll receive an email when the on-demand recording is ready for viewing. If you want to sponsor an event with us, you can reach out to Nancy Wilcox from our team and go to our website to register for upcoming panels. With that, I want to thank our tremendous panel, Chris Akeroyd, Dennis Leber, and Ryan Witt, and I want to thank Proofpoint for sponsoring and making the event possible, and I want to thank you for attending. And with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.